Hello, everyone. Thanks for letting me be here. My name is Kelly Keegan, and I am currently living in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is located in the Midwest, if you're not familiar. Cedar Rapids is truly the definition of the Midwest, about 4 hours from Chicago, 4 hours from Minneapolis, Minnesota, if you're familiar with that, and about 4 hours from St. Louis. So definitely in the center of the US. Um, Iowa is known for farming and small towns. Cedar Rapids is the second biggest city in Iowa, but it's still not very big, especially compared to cities in the Philippines. So I'm so excited to be here. I want to tell you a little bit about myself before we get talking about today's topics. Um, so I am no longer officially in education, but I was an ESL teacher for 13 years. I taught all ages, all levels, and all language backgrounds. My first degree was in communications and journalism, but then right after I graduated with my bachelor's, I moved to South Korea and taught English for 2 years. So that's how I got started in the world of ESL. The first year I was in Korea, I taught at a private school called a Hagwon, and there I taught all ages from first grade all the way through high school. And the second year I was in Korea, I taught in a public elementary school. So that was a little bit different of an experience. I had a Korean co-teacher with me, and I taught all of the levels or the grades in that elementary school. After my time in Korea, I went back to Iowa and I decided that I really liked teaching ESL. So I decided to pursue my master's degree in TESOL, teaching um, English to speakers of other languages. And I got that degree from the University of Northern Iowa, which is one of three state schools here in Iowa. It's the smallest one of the three state schools. And while I was in grad school, I had the opportunity to spend a semester in Vietnam and China teaching ESL at various different institutions, some private schools, some universities. And I was able to teach English in the intensive English program at the University of Northern Iowa while I was earning my degree. And then after I earned my degree, I moved to and took a job at a larger state school called the University of Iowa. It's actually the largest one. Well, no, I think it's the second largest in the state. And I worked in their intensive English program and their ESL program there. So I taught a lot of students from all over the world. The majority of the students, I would say, were from Asia, from China, Korea, Japan, some students from the Middle East. But then I worked there for a few years and then I applied for the English Language Fellows Program. And I was assigned to Dimsu, Esluk, in Agoo. And I was there for the 2015-2016 school year. So while at Dimsu, I taught undergraduate English courses. I taught some graduate TESOL courses. And just overall, throughout my 10 months in the Philippines, I got to go to many different locations, saw several universities. I participated in several conferences, and I met hundreds and hundreds of teachers. So I was involved in a MOOC while I was there called The Art of Poetry. So I'm thrilled to be back. And if our paths have crossed before and I look familiar, then I want to say hello again. It's nice to be here. So anyway, after my time in the Philippines, that was a while ago now. It feels like just yesterday. But after my time in the Philippines, I taught for one more year at the University of Iowa. And then I moved to a small liberal arts college here in the city where I live in Cedar Rapids named Co College. And I taught ESL there. Mostly Japanese exchange students were at that school. I also got married. I had a daughter who is now 4. And I taught there for a handful of years. And then almost 2 years ago now, kind of as the few crazy years of COVID were winding down, I decided to move over to the business world, and I took a role as a learning and development specialist at a local company called Van Meter, which is a electrical distributor here in the city where I live. So it was a big change. I'm no longer teaching grammar and vocabulary, every day in the traditional classroom, but in my role, I get to be in a classroom and I get to teach new employees about the company, and I get to offer skills training in many different areas. So that's what I'm up to now. I still get to teach ESL and fill my bucket doing what I love, but I get to do that through volunteering at a local nonprofit here in town that offers ESL classes for refugees in my community. So I'm currently meeting once a week with a woman who is from Chad, Africa, and she's a beginning ESL student, and I love spending time with her and getting to do ESL again. So just a few more things. I know this is a long introduction. I'm sorry. Last December, I had the honor of being an expert guest teacher for the American English for Educators Facebook page, and I got to facilitate some discussions and help create content around overcoming setbacks and planning for success. So if I saw you there, great. That was a really fun month for me. So thank you, Ma'am Melda, for extending an invitation for me to be here today. I'm really happy to join you all in your learning. Okay, so I got to look at your syllabus, and I'm just going to comment on what you'll be talking about and share some of my experiences and thoughts around each of your topics for each week. So for week 1, it looks like you're talking about student motivation. And my main thoughts around student motivation, and this will be no surprise to Ma'am Melda, revolves around this idea of grit. So I did my master's research and thesis around grit in language learning, and I truly believe that grit and creating gritty students is what drives success in language learning. So when I say grit, I think about somebody like climbing a mountain, right? And they're going up, and maybe it feels good at the beginning and they've got lots of energy, but then maybe they trip over a root, or they go up and then they have this like easy downhill for a while, but then it's like a sharp incline again, right? And then maybe there's a storm along the way, but eventually they get to the summit, the top of that mountain, and that's such a great feeling, right? So grit is like that. It's defined as perseverance and passion for long-term goals. And grit, in the end, it's not about talent. It's not about high IQ. It's not about luck, right? It just comes down to being able to keep going and have the passion to keep going to reach those goals. So when I think about grit in relation to student motivation in the classroom, I think about, okay, let's break this down into 2 pieces, right? Perseverance is the first part of grit. And how can we build perseverance in our students, right? And I think I have lots of ideas around this, but one, I think that it's really important for you as the teacher to create a culture in which the students can make mistakes in the classroom and can feel like they can make mistakes, and that they have opportunities to try again and to take risks and keep trying to develop their skills over time, right? Because that's what perseverance is. It's trying something, it's making a mistake, but brushing yourself off and trying it again and to keep going, right? So I challenge you to think about, how can you create a culture in your classroom where students feel like they can do that, right? One way I've done this over the years is to allow like redos on some assignments. So in my in a speaking class that I had when I taught university students. Um, Students would do a variety of speeches throughout the year. Every few weeks, they'd have to do speeches or presentations. But then for their midterm, they were allowed to redo one of the speeches they did prior in the class. And same with the final exam. They were allowed a redo of one of their prior presentations, right? And by offering this, it allows them to really reflect back on their first presentation, make changes, and keep practicing so that it's better the second time. And it was almost always better the second time, right? It's also a lot easier on my end as far as grading goes of those assessments, right? I'm just grading how much they improved from the first time to the second time. And it makes it a lot faster and easier for me to grade those midterm and final exams. I think another way to create a culture that builds perseverance is being realistic about the challenges and the struggles that students face in language learning. I think opening it up to sharing in the classroom to talk about challenges that students are experiencing. I think you sharing your own challenges and struggles with language learning or certain grammar points or pronunciation or whatever it is you're focusing on, but speaking about it in a realistic way, right? And knowing and sharing these experiences where there's highs and lows, right? It's not all Skittles and rainbows all the time, right? It's takes perseverance to keep going, and it takes motivation to keep going. And I think talking about growth mindset, this idea that you're not good at something, you're not bad at something, and you're certainly not good at or bad at language learning, right? You have the ability, and anyone has the ability to get better at any skill you practice, including language learning, as long as you continue to practice more and more and more. And you can be persistent and perseverant in it, right? So when you do fail, you just can get back up and keep going. The second part of that definition of grit, right? It's perseverance and then passion for long-term goals. So I think about, okay, how can you build passion for long-term goals in your classroom? And I think one is to really help your students set goals. Talk about goal setting, right? What's your why? Why are you here? Why are you learning English? Is it because you have to be, you have no choice? And that might be the case for some students. And it's important to know which students feel that way and which don't, right? Is it because you want to get a job in the future? Is it because you want to enter a certain college that has a requirement for language? Do you need a certain exam score, right? And if students don't have a why, if they don't have a goal, then you can really help them envision a why and a goal. Oh, maybe someday you want to travel, and knowing English will help make traveling to different countries a lot easier. You can, if they can't envision it, then give them some ideas. Yeah. Another thought on that is to help them understand that language learning is indeed a long-term goal. I think a lot of students can enter the language learning classroom and think like, oh, this can just be a short-term thing, right? There's no easy, fast fix to learning a language. It is in itself always going to be a long-term goal. And by sharing your own experiences of your long journey of language learning and how you've improved over time, can help motivate students and help them understand that it's step-by-step journey, right? It's not just one class or one quarter or one semester, right? That it's indeed long-term. And then I think another great way is to just talk about and show examples of people from your culture or people that are relevant to your students that are examples of grit, examples of people who have overcome obstacles and persevered through challenges and met goals over an extended period of time. So it could be an athlete, musician, but I'm sure you can think of lots of examples from your local community or your own culture that students could connect to, right? And I think the biggest way to create engagement and motivation in your classroom is really just to model grit as a teacher. So be a real human, be imperfect, and be transparent with your students. So I think you should model and tell students about your own language learning as much as possible. Share stories about your own experiences. Share stories about your own mistakes, maybe something funny where you said the wrong word in the wrong situation, or the wrong pronunciation, right? We all have those funny stories. Share those experiences and talk about how you've changed and how you've grown from them. And then in the classroom, you can easily model grit by just like trying new things, trying new activities. Surely some of those activities will fail. And when they do, say, oh, that activity didn't work like I thought it would work. And say that to them flat out in front of the room. Acknowledge that you tried something, it didn't work, and admit how you're going to change that, or maybe you're never going to do that activity again, or maybe you have ideas on how you can change it or adapt it to try it again. But I think just being honest about those things goes a long way. And I think as far as the language you use goes in the classroom, try to use language that really encourages and enforces growth mindset. So things like, you haven't mastered that grammar point yet, right? Or nice try, good effort. Maybe it wasn't the correct answer, but I admire that you took a risk and you tried, right? So commenting on effort, not perfection, and using words like yet can really enforce this idea that students have the ability to shape and grow and develop their own mind. And then you can also do affirmations, right? Have students encourage each other. You encourage the students. I know some classrooms have little like jars, affirmation jars, so people can write little positive things, great job, or you did it, and put it into jars to have in the classroom to just pull out at any time and hand to different students. So I think that's another way to keep students motivated in the classroom. Some other thoughts around motivation is, as much as possible, offer choice and variety. I know this can be really hard, especially in the Philippines. I know you have curriculum and guidelines that you need to follow, and you have a lot to do in a short amount of time. But as much as possible, let students get to choose. So maybe just a little activity like a show and tell, let students bring in whatever they'd like, speak about that thing in front of the classroom for 2 minutes or in small groups for 2 minutes, and really leave it open-ended so that students can express themselves uniquely in just those little ways like that. And it doesn't take much time, and it doesn't take much effort, but it's just offering that choice when you can. Okay, looks like the next topic that you guys are discussing is around assessments, needs assessments, formative assessments. My thoughts around assessments, and I'll start first with needs assessments. I like to use a needs assessment before, or send out a little survey, a formal survey before class begins, if I'm able to. So I have often used Google Forms or Microsoft Forms to send just a few questions. Just mainly the questions are, how can I help you learn best? And then what types of learning do you prefer? Do you prefer to work alone? Do you prefer to work in groups? And then have students kind of self-assess on what skill areas they think they're the strongest in and what skill areas they feel like they need more work on. So you can do these surveys in all different forms. If you have younger students, you can have pictures. You could have it in your own language, or you can have it in the target language. But I find that a needs assessment before class is really useful. Sometimes that's not possible, and you don't know exactly who's going to be in your class until the first day. And in those cases, I like to do just really informal needs assessments then on the first day. So usually I'll just bring a stack of note cards. It's pretty simple, and pass them out. And I say, okay, write your name on one side. I usually do a little icebreaker with the note cards too. Maybe draw a picture to tell us more about your hobbies. And then on the back side, I'll have them answer a set of questions, but usually no more than 5 questions. Maybe how long have you been studying English? Some of the questions that I just mentioned before. What are your learning preferences, groups or alone? And then what can I do to help you learn best? How do you learn best? And just kind of leave it open-ended and let them write down information on their cards. I'll also have them think about goals. Like, what is your goal for this class? What kinds of learning are you hoping to get out of this class? So those are good to have on the first day if you're not able to do a formal assessment to send it out beforehand. Okay. As far as formative assessment goes, I think that the best way to do this is through exit slips. If you can. I know in the Philippines you have large classes, so it might be hard to do exit slips every day for every student. But a good way to do exit slips is maybe a sticky note or just a small note card, and have them write down at the end of class, okay, what's something that was really clear today and that you understand well, and what's something that is kind of muddy, not so clear that you need more clarification on. And then you collect those, you look through them before you go to the class the next day, and you kind of know a list of things that, oh, maybe I need to review present perfect tense, because half the class put that as their muddy on the exit slip. Okay. Exit slips can be all different forms, right? You can have them write just takeaways on it. You can have them write just questions on it. But those are a nice way to just keep tabs on what students are understanding and what they're not on a day-to-day basis. And they don't have to be every day. You can do them randomly. You can do them once a week, whatever works best for your context. Other assignments or assessments that I like to do in my classroom were journals or learning logs. So for a grammar class that I taught, I had them do what we called a grammar log or grammar journal. And let me share my screen here. And so this was the grammar journal assignment, but basically whatever grammar objective we were covering for that week, I'd have them write down in their notebook, or they could type it up and submit it electronically. 5 examples of how they encountered that grammar objective outside of the classroom that week. So I'd have them go seek out examples in real life outside of the classroom, write them down, and then identify what kind of structure they found and any questions that they might have about it. So I challenge them to look at news reports, to think about conversations they were having with each other, and then maybe social media posts, but anywhere outside of the classroom where they saw the structure and they could identify it, and then write a little question or explain why this type of grammar was used in that context. So this was great. I had them do this weekly, and I had students do this weekly, and then I would collect them at the end of the week, and I'd pull some really great examples. I get some really great questions. I found examples that I could use with the larger classroom, then bring back and share with everyone. Um, and this was a great way to just keep tabs on if they were understanding the grammar objective that we were covering that week or not. Did they hit the mark or miss the mark? Okay, some other thoughts around formative assessments. I'd have students do more in-depth midterm reflections or review of their goals halfway through the semester or halfway through your time together. You could do that in journaling or have them look through their previous assignments that you've given back and then write what they think they have done well in, what they still need to grow in. If you're able to, and I know this isn't always possible with your large classes there in the Philippines, but if you're able to do one-on-one conferences to give them individual attention and feedback, I highly recommend that. That is a game changer as far as getting to know the students, understanding where their struggles are and how you can really help them is, getting one-on-one time. And if you could, even if you could schedule it so you met with each student one time for 10 minutes. If you have office hours times during the semester, do it. Do it. See if you can schedule it. Self-assessments. So as much as possible, I like to have the students do self-assessments. One, it takes the weight off you. You have plenty of things that you can be grading and doing. And so why not pass off some assessment to the students and kind of force them to be reflective. So I would do a participation self-assessment in my class. Let me share my screen here. And it was a form that, let's see. Nope, not that one. Not that one. This one. Yep. So I would pass this out randomly, explain how to use it, of course, and then I'd pass it out on random days. So on any random days, the students knew that they would have to assess themselves on their participation. And by participation, it meant, did they show up on time? Were they paying attention? Were they prepared with all of their books and materials? Did they participate in any group or pair interaction for that day? And then did they volunteer an answer or at any point contribute to the large group? So they had to do 4 things to get full participation points. And they would think about it at the end of class when I'd pass this sheet out, and they would circle 0 or 1, and then they'd write the total. I would collect those, and then I would agree or disagree with the points that they gave themselves, and then I write why. So it forces the students to be honest because I'm checking them and I'm keeping them accountable. And if I know that they didn't bring their book that day, but they gave themselves 1 point for that, then I would take that point away and I say, nope, you actually don't get 1 point for preparation. You didn't have your book today. And I would change their score. And my score was the final score. So I thought this was just a really nice way for students to practice self-assessment and reflection, but also have that teacher piece too, where you are adding your thoughts and giving them feedback on how they were doing with their self-assessment. So that's an easy way for you to get students to start thinking about and reflecting on their own behavior. In general, anytime you can do reflection, the more the better. If it's possible, if you're teaching a speaking class, to record students, record their presentations, and then have them watch them back and find their own errors. That's another activity I've done often with a speaking class. It's pretty easy now to have, most students have phones, so if they do, you can just record them on their own phone and they have a copy of it right there. and then assign them to go through, rewatch their presentation or their speech and write down the mistakes that they've noticed and reflect on those mistakes. I have a worksheet that I would do with students. Let me share my screen one more time. Let's see here. Oh, I called it the error analysis. So they'd watch their presentation back, they'd write down the incorrect sentence, they would correct it themselves, and then they'd write a little reminder about what to do for the next time. And they did this for all of them, their mistakes. And then part 2, they had kind of an overall reflection. How have your skills improved? What do you want to continue practicing during the last few weeks of class, or whatever? You can change and adapt that to your context. My thoughts on peer assessments. I think peer assessments are good, but they do require a lot of training up front and extra time up front on your part. But it's a great skill to have, to know how to give feedback to your classmates and peers. In fact, that's a lot of the training that I offer now to adults in the business world is about how to give feedback to each other. So if you can build that into your class, and if you have time for it, I encourage you to have students evaluate each other and give feedback to each other. Feedback in general, I would say it can be overwhelming to give feedback. So to keep it easy on you and to keep it simple for the students, I think that you need to focus on just one objective. So for example, in a piece of writing, after you've just studied the present progressive grammar, collect a writing assignment from the students and then only check that they're doing present progressive grammar correctly. Don't correct anything else on the paper, because it can be a lot. Maybe there's a million other mistakes there, and you turn it back to them and they're just full of red ink. And that can be really discouraging. So keep it to one objective, focus on one objective, and give feedback on that objective. Okay, a few more thoughts. Project-based learning. So my one thought around project-based learning is to connect with the community as much as possible. Do some service projects if you're able to. For one speaking class that I had at Co-College, I was able to introduce small groups to different nonprofits in town, and then I let them choose the organization that they were most interested in. Then they went and visited, they interviewed the staff, and they were in charge of planning a fundraising event for that organization. And then they presented about that at the end of the semester. They presented about their experience and what they learned. So that was great. They were using all of their speaking skills and interviewing skills. And then they were also doing something good for the community and meeting and interacting with people outside of the classroom. So connect with the community if you can. Bring people into your classroom or send your students out into the community. And then allow for them to do kind of teach backs and present to the class what they learned. As far as grouping goes, I usually assign students to their groups, because I've found that if you just let students choose, they will likely just choose their friends or choose to be in a group with like-minded people. And we know from research that diverse groups are more successful. There are challenges that comes with being in a diverse group, diversity with abilities and experiences and backgrounds, but it's more reflective of the real world, and working through those challenges is really important. So I like to mix them up and force them to be in a group with mixed abilities and experiences and backgrounds. Okay, and the last module, it looks like you're talking about games. So I love doing games in the classroom. I think that doing culturally relevant games is important. I came up with some vocabulary games based around a popular show called The Tonight Show here in the United States, where the host Jimmy Fallon does games with his celebrity guests. And I adapted those games and brought them into the classroom. These games were published in the English Teaching Forum Journal. And so you can find the article and how to play them here if you're interested. But I would just say find games that the students are already familiar with and just adapt it for your classroom and for the age group and the objective that you're working with. That's going to be the most fun for them if they're games that they can really connect with. Board games are always fun for all ages. If you can, have students create the board games or help you create the board games, and then you can collect them and keep them for future classrooms. My tips for playing games would be that you keep groups small, like 4 to 5 students, to allow for max participation from each student, and then truly act as a facilitator. So you kind of have to let some control go. Like, it's going to be noisy, it's going to be a little chaotic, but truly you're acting just as a facilitator. You're walking around kind of guiding the students, not correcting them, unless they're just not following the rules of the game, but not correcting their language as they're playing, right? This should be a safe space for them to make mistakes, and they can give feedback to each other. But you don't want to be walking around and just correcting their every word, right? It's more free flowing, allow them space and opportunities to make mistakes and try again. With any game, you want to first model how you play it before you play it. I always set a timer or display the timer so everybody knows, okay, 5 minutes left, 3 minutes left, okay, 1 minute left, and then end the game on time. Because if you've played games in your classroom, they can everyone wants to just keep playing, so you do have to have a limit and set a timer. But overall, use games as much as possible. Everybody loves games, and it allows, like I said earlier, it allows for students to, in a low stress environment, make mistakes and try again, which can build grit and student motivation. So play games. There's a lot of great board games that are already on American English on their website. So a lot of good resources where you can print off and adapt for your own purposes. So I encourage you to look at those. All right. I think those are all of my thoughts. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here again, Ma'am Melda. This was such a pleasure. I wish I could join you all in person, but it was going to be the middle of the night for me. So I hope that you're learning lots and enjoying yourself in this MOOC class. And I hope to see you all again. Take care.